Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Tag Tuesday, a very wet, very dark, very rainy Tag Tuesday here in Boston, as you can tell from the rather deflated bean behind me. It's been dark and rainy all day. I think we're getting a few hours of relief, and then more rain overnight and well into tomorrow. So, if the bean and I are going to get in a walk, we'd better do it today. Although, the only reason when I just said that WALK word that she didn't perk her head up is because she doesn't want to go. When it's weather like this, she's hoping that I won't say that word. But one way or another, I have a tag. I was tagged today by Brian at Bookish. It's the Joy Over Pain tag that was created by Jessica at Lady Lovestead Reads. And Brian tagged me. He did it in this I swear, BookTube. I swear, it's the place where people who are the least susceptible to fads go in order to follow fads. He tagged everybody at the beginning of his tag, which is the equivalent on the playground of saying you're tagged, instead of tag, you're it. But anyway, I'm not going to do that. But one way or another, this is a good theoretical tag. Doesn't really require you to pull books off your shelf. It's much more along the lines of you talking about books. And I, of course, love to talk about books. And I couldn't help but notice when Brian tagged me, he tagged a bunch of people, and then he paused for a pregnant moment, and then he tagged me and specifically sort of took me to task and said, I know a lot of the questions in this tag might seem... And then he paused to give the evil eye to his dogs who were barking. And then he said, might seem like the kind you'd scorn. You'd say this isn't the kind of questions you can answer. It's not the way you read. But he'd like to see me try it. The distinct impression, when I read between the lines, is that he was asking me to do a thoughtful job, with the distinct implication being that often I don't. Challenge accepted. So this is about the polarities of, well, for you theological eggheads, for you maybe midrash eggheads, this is a very Manichaean tag. It's all about joy and pain. And naturally, the title, Joy Over Pain, even as the title of a tag, starts to alert my Catholic sensibilities. But we'll see. We'll see what kind of trouble we get into in the course of the tag. The prompt number one is, do you mostly read books illustrating pain or illustrating joy, and why? And I know this is going to sound Jesuitically nitpicking right out of the gate, but I don't know what kind of weight the word illustrating is doing here. I really don't. I almost think, I don't know, like Brian, I haven't watched the channel where this tag originates, but I almost want to read this as what it's really asking is about books that celebrate joy or pain. Illustrate? What book doesn't illustrate joy or pain? Or both? I don't know of many that I'm not 100% sure what the word illustrate is doing in this question, but if we're going to take it in the simplest read as just being, concentrate on, uplift, emphasize, if we take it that way, then I would probably be in the same boat as Brian in his answers. I'll leave a link to his video down below since I'm obsessively girlfriendishly talking about it. But he mentions what is going to be self-evident. I imagine that as this tag makes the rounds, everybody is going to mention it, which is that pain is the result of conflict, and conflict is the motor of stories, fiction or nonfiction. It's extremely hard to make a good story out of something that has no conflict, out of something that is either joy or that is happiness building towards joy. And if you don't believe me, just hang around Tom L.A. Books' Guide to Dante's Inferno long enough to get to the Paradiso, and you will see what I mean. What I and many other people consider to be easily the most beautiful section of the Commedia and the most unreadable, because it is leached pure. It is leached more and more of any kind of pain and therefore any kind of conflict until finally you reach the ending. And that is true with a lot of books. This is one of the reasons why I'm not as big a fan of, for instance, cozy mysteries as I could be, because it seems like a smuggled in attempt on the writer's part to leach conflict, to leach pain out of a story that should contain it. Same thing is true with, for instance, the more religiously themed romance. Amish romances, love-inspired, line from Harlequin, that sort of thing. They also seem, sometimes, some of them, not all of them, some of them are quite the opposite, but some of them, that also seems like you're trying to bubble wrap the edges of the furniture. And I think you do that at the cost of your story. You do that at the cost of drama, no matter what you're writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But if I don't want to be all snotty and categorical, and if I take the question just on its face, then once again I would be unhelpful. Because if we're talking emphasize, in other words, if you're leaving the story concentrating on the pain or concentrating on the joy, I would say my reading is probably about 50-50. Which doesn't help you at all. I read lots and lots of contemporary fiction, despite the fact that I sneer at it, despite the fact that I am its foremost critic, for all of its laziness, for all of its entitledness, for all of its navel-gazing, for all of its crappy prose and crappy diction and crappy plot and crappy pacing and crappy narrative and crappy character delineation, for all of that. I have been making those complaints for a very long time. I am a fierce critic of the made-up stories. But even so, as many of my critical brethren will be happy to tell you, or maybe unhappy to tell you, maybe it'll take a glass of wine to drag it out of them reluctantly, even though I am the strongest critic of the made-up stories, I read more of them than anybody, even their foremost fans. It's just part of what I do. So I read a lot of that, and most of that is constructed on pain, although in the 21st century, quite a bit of that, there is a very strong substrata of the made-up of contemporary literary fiction that is a triumph narrative. The main character, if you want to call it that, is a point-on-point, absolutely faithful reproduction, a Xerox copy of the author, and that person's the pain, the struggles that person has to overcome are entirely external and unjust. It's just 1,000 little thin autobiographical autofiction literary novels, each one of which stars, I don't even know, I was going to say Rosa Parks, but Rosa Parks would have been the first person to admit she had demons. These people don't. These authors don't admit they have demons. The demons are outside. The demons are the microaggressors. The demons are the racists, which is literally everybody except their friends. And their friends aren't friends. Their friends are only allies. Friend slips up, they become a racist. And all the novel is just the unbroken string of, triumph of the will, stations of the cross, until they finally get what they have always deserved. And what have they always deserved? Oh, I don't know. Maybe a tenure track position at a major university? Okay, well, do you have any academic experience? No. Do you have any reading experience? No. Do you know anything about what you're talking about? No. Can you write? No. Can you think clearly? No. Do you want to teach classes? No, not really. I don't really like people. I like allies and I like Twitter, but I don't really like people. Well, okay, given the fact that your answer was no to all of those questions, why should you? You're a racist. so that strand aside, most literary fiction is pain oriented. I mean, the ne plus ultra, the ultimate example of that, of course, being A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, but there are plenty of other examples as well, and there always have been. On this channel I've mentioned a few times, I think, probably, or maybe it was in person over wine, I've mentioned a few times the horrific opening 7 pages of The Persian Boy by Mary Reynolds. And that thing is, 60 years old? Just horrific. And that's just start. Then there are obstacles all throughout. So I'm going to, but that's 50%. But then the other 50%, a lot of what I read is, for instance, romance novels. One of the most refreshing things about romance novels is also one of the, if you could call it, one of the rules. Certainly one of the assumptions or the givens is that romance novels will have happy endings. These things, the entire industry was patterned after one novel, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Infinite variations, but that one novel is the ruling ur-text of romance. And that novel, of course, has a cascade of happy endings. So, and I go to romance novels because I kind of know I'm going to get a happy ending, and I very much like that. But not only that, what you could call lesser fiction, genre fiction, lesser is probably a loaded word. I certainly don't think of it that way. But, for instance, lots and lots of of science fiction, lots of murder mysteries, including mysteries in series, lots of stuff like that, lots of more, I don't even know what the word is to use. Lesser is wrong, because it would involve Less by Andrew Sean Greer, which the snobby fans of literary fiction all condescended to hate. But it isn't just fiction either. It's lots and lots of other stuff too. You'll get a nonfiction book like The New Trail of Tears, where you are just crashed to the mat and you're not allowed a breath of hope at all for the whole course of the book. And that applies to so many other nonfiction books, but there'll be plenty of others that just want to tell you a story or even want to please you. That's true even in nature guides, in natural history writing, where the tone should be unending pain. Your children, if you're watching this video, your children are going to come to age, they're going to come to your age, to parenting age, in a world with no rhinos, no elephants, no zebras, no great whales, no simian cousins of humans, no orangutans, those are already almost gone, very few chimpanzees except in experiments and in zoos, and no wild gorillas, and so on and so forth down the line. No bumblebees, no butterflies, hardly any fish in the ocean. So you'd think logically that the sort of presiding ethos of natural history would be pain, but it's mostly joy. I think probably because it's mostly written by people who go out into the field to see these creatures, and that is a joy-inducing experience, except for the aforementioned bears. we won't get into that. Let's just go on to the second question. We'll go on about these at great length. Number 2 is, do you see books about pain as more intellectually valuable? Why or why not? Again, I don't know. I haven't watched the channel where this tag originated, and I really should. And I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth or thoughts in anybody's mind. But it, again, seems to me that a lot of weird architectural stress is being put on the word valuable. One way or another, if we skip that for now and just read it in the most easy sense, then I'm going to say absolutely yes. Narratives, nonfiction or fiction, that are, what was it again? About joy, are probably more satisfying for the author to write, but they are universally less satisfying for the reader to read. That's true. I can almost think of no exceptions to that, where I mean, I love my Regency romances, don't get me wrong, and I love science fiction and fantasy stories where the hero wins. I value those a lot, but the ones that intellectually valuable, the ones that dig in the deeper, the ones that work on me more, are always the ones where pain is, if not exalted, certainly the most active quality. So I'm going to go with pain in the broad sense of these questions here. What a conversation I could have with the maker of this tag about this subject, because the questions don't really do it justice. But in terms of one thing, while I'm on this second question, books about pain as being intellectually valuable. In terms of that, I have a recommendation that I want to show you on the rad pad. I couldn't let this question go without. This is by Thomas Dormandy, and it's called The Worst of Evils: Man's Fight Against Pain. And it's from a university press, Yale maybe, or Princeton, and it's terrific. It's probably going on 20 years old now, but so I don't know if it's available. I don't know if it's still in print. But it is amazing. Not only incredibly detailed and incredibly scholarly, but also really readable. Best study of pain that I have read. So I wanted to make sure to recommend it, because I'm pretty sure that it isn't one of the 10 million books that has ever come up on this channel. But anyway, let's go on to number 3. Why do you think major book prizes like the Booker and the Pulitzer mainly award books about pain? And again, I'm sorry to be niggling at the questions here. But I have 2 niggling points here. One is, obviously, one niggling point is that books that deal with pain a lot, or where pain is a major force in the book, pain as, broadly defined, aren't still necessarily about that. A Little Life is not about pain. And I don't know I don't know, aside from, for instance, Dormandy's book, I don't know of a whole lot of books, especially fiction, which I'm assuming is what's being talked about here, that are about pain. But that's quibble number one, and quibble number two involves prizes like the Booker or the Pulitzer anyway. I mean, the believer's answer here, a person who believes in those prizes at least a little bit, their answer would be that the reason that they award these books is because of their literary merit, because as Brian notes in his video, these things are about conflict. Conflict brings about pain to somebody, and that therefore it's inevitable that the books that are more riveting, more disturbing, more unnerving, will be about conflict, and therefore will be, in air quotes, about pain. That's the believer's answer. and the quibbling answer that I had when I first read the question was that, well, how about their literary quality? And maybe that's why these prizes are awarded, not necessarily because the book is about pain or joy or anything else, but because the books have literary quality. And then I stopped myself, because when is the last time that was true? That is the rare exception. That almost never happens. These things, all of these book awards are given for the politics of the moment. All in hyphens. Politics of the moment. All these things are given in the politics of the moment. So they're not about literary quality, and they're also not about pain or joy. They're not about anything except a list of checked boxes about the author. The book is totally irrelevant. Totally. As 2021's award season will amply show. If I'm wrong about that, feel free to tweak my nose a little. Feel free to tell me that I was wrong. But 2021's book award season will amply show what I'm talking about, which is that this is entirely about the authors. It's entirely about their personal history, their DNA profile, their cultural history, and those will be the only things talked about the shortlisters and the winners of every major literary prize in 2021. The books might get a perfunctory, airy paragraph in a 3,000-word review in the New York Review of Books, but most of the rest of that will be about the author, about the author's genetic heritage, about the author's social experience, about the author's sexual identity. That's not only book prizes, politics of the moment for 2021, but for all years henceforth. So when the question asks, why do you think major book prizes mainly award books about pain? My answer is they don't. They don't care what the books are about at all. Their awards are entirely based on non-literary factors, and will be from now on. We'll see if I'm right. Then let's see here. Number 4 is, do you use and agree with the term guilty pleasure? Why or why not? Now, here is a type of question that I could easily imagine. Hi, baby. Hi, baby. What's up? They were hoping for this. They don't care about me nagging on about books. They were hoping you would wake up and be cute. And you are, aren't you? You are a good dog. She's a very good dog. She's on a little schnauzer hunger strike. I'm forcing myself not to worry. Schnauzer people have been telling me for years that schnauzers do this, and that there's nothing wrong. They sometimes just don't want to eat. Not a question of what you put in front of them. They just don't feel like it. And she most certainly does not feel like it. She has a little nibble here and there. I know she's not actually starving, because she has a little bit of food here and there. Sometimes she'll take a treat. Sometimes she'll have a bit of her food. What you doing? Huh? Oh, there you go. Are you just going to make your bed? You are. You're going to make your bed. She's such a one for doing this. My other dogs, my beagles, would sometimes do this kind of thrashing at things in order to make a bed. But not like her. She's very thorough about it. Baby, what are you doing? Oh. No, baby. That's not going to work. That's not going to move. Oh my. Oh goodness. Frida, what are you doing? What are you doing, baby? Baby, I'm trying to make deathless art here. And you're just being... Oh God. I have to wait for her to settle down or she's going to knock the camera over. What do you think? Do you want to sit down? No? Yeah, that thing you smell is your food. It's filling the room with smell, but you're not eating it. Oh, God. Oh, oh there we go. There we go. All right. Well, I figure if Brian can interrupt his videos with dogs, so can I. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. Okay. About guilty pleasures. This is exactly the sort of question that I think Brian had in mind for don't blow this off. Actually talk about it. Don't just say there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. Now, he, and I'm sure everybody else who answers this question is going to say, I don't feel guilty about anything that I read. And I want to get away, again, from a Catholic reading of this. We're not talking here about actual guilt. We're talking, when we mention... What are you doing? Frida, what are you doing? Why can't you settle down? Oh, okay. Is that good? Yes. No. Anyway, what we're talking about here, when we talk about guilty pleasures, is not something that you feel guilty for reading. It's just an easy term. What we mean here is something you're reading that is totally predictable, totally derivative, maybe both in the sense that you've read it a million times before. In other words, something that you're reading, not that makes you feel guilty, but that when you're reading it, you know, I have a finite amount of reading time in my life, and this reading time could be better spent. It could be spent on finding something new, something that I haven't read before, something that will challenge me more than just wallowing in the warm bath of reading The Princess of Mars for the 1000th time. That is a guilty pleasure. It's not that it makes you feel guilty, because all reading is fun, and all reading is legitimate. Or should be fun, and is definitely legitimate. It's not that it makes you feel guilty. It's that you know your limited reading time could be better spent. And I don't feel any guilt about any of the stuff that I read, but God knows if I read The Return of the King, I am thinking, unless it's for a buddy read, unless I've got some other external reason that makes it valuable and that makes it not quite a reprise of the 1,000 times before. If I'm reading Return of the King, I am definitely considering it a so-called guilty pleasure. It's not that I'm feeling guilty while I'm reading it, and it's not that I'm enjoying it any less. It's that I know this time could be better spent. There's nothing wrong with admitting that. So the question is, do you use and agree with the phrase guilty pleasure? I do, but I use it with a stipulation. I'm not saying that anyone should feel guilty about reading anything. It's just we know what we mean when we use this phrase, right? I hope that we do. So I do use this phrase, and it crops up. Much as I mean, I'm no sterner here or purer than any other sinner. If I'm just, what was it? Just 2 days ago, I spent a chunk of the afternoon reading that Legion of Superheroes 5 years later gigantic omnibus that one of you sent me. I know those issues backwards and forwards. I can quote them. And I spent a chunk of time reading those. I also, even more recently than that, yesterday, I was reading, I went looking for an old issue of Savage Sword of Conan from 50 years ago, just to make an art comparison with a new adaptation of a story in that issue, and ended up reading probably 10 issues of Savage Sword of Conan, all just in great loving detail, but all of which I know. and while I was doing it, I was thinking, all right, just a little bit more here, and then you've got, stuff to read. You've got crappy contemporary novels in June to read. So I definitely do it. But that's what we mean. That's what we mean by guilty pleasures. Not that anyone's making you feel guilty. That we ought to come up with a different word, a different word for it. Errant pleasures, maybe, or truant pleasures. But prompt number 5 is: do you think books centering on joy are guilty pleasures? No, not even in the sense of the word that I just described. Because there are books that end with great shouts of joy that I've read that I reread all the time. There's one particular book that I have in mind from maybe Midrash called Pope Patrick that is just about as joyous a book as you could ask for without prostituting your brain completely. And when I read that, reread that, I don't consider it a guilty pleasure. I want it to pick me up. The books that convey joy like that, I want them to do that. That's why I'm going to them, even though they are the kind of guilty pleasure that I just described, where you know your reading time could be better spent because you know the book so well, there's no reason to read it again. I still do that, absolutely. Uh, Question number 6 is, do you read in secret? Are there books you read but never talk about because of embarrassment, shame, or guilty about liking them? That sort of thing. And this is one of the things that always comes up when people talk about e-reading. Whether it's your little Kindle or an iPad or your phone on the subway, for instance, or on a bus, or in a crowded waiting room, all those things from the pre-pandemic age that may come back. If everybody's vaccinated, those things may come back. It certainly looks different than it once did. It doesn't look permanent anymore, which is great. I've heard from so many people over the years, especially at the bookstore where I used to work, when people would say, the great thing about my Kindle or my Nook or my Kobo is that no one can see what I'm reading, so they can't judge me. I always think, I was happy to hear that. I was happy that they liked their device, but I always thought readers should be more secure than that. There's no wrong way to read, so who cares what somebody else judges about what you do? I've had it happen to me. I've had people judge me, and even sometimes, a couple of times, people have actually said something. One time I was on a crowded Boston subway car. I had, at the time, no phone and no e-reader. So I pulled out my book. Once the train doors closed and I knew that I was in for a 20-minute ride, I pulled out my book. And at the moment, my book was a romance. And not a stately old Regency romance. It was a modern Regency romance. So everybody was naked and it was a big florid thing. And someone on the subway, not far away from me, we were packed in, I was holding a bar, someone not far away said, "Why don't you try reading something real?" I looked up, I made eye contact, and I smiled, and I went right back to reading. But I could easily have said what I was tempted to say, and what I'm always tempted to say in the face of book snobs, which is, well, A, all books are real, and B, you want to match your reading against mine, let's go ahead and do that. If you're seriously contending, as people do, when they're insecure, if you're seriously contending that you're going to say I'm a shallow or a superficial reader, let's test that hypothesis, shall we? I'd be happy to test that against virtually anybody alive today. But anyway, no, I don't. The answer to the question is no, I have never read anything in secret. I don't feel the actual Catholic sense of guilt about any reading, and neither should you, neither should anybody. There's no such thing as the actual literal definition of a guilty pleasure. There's no wrong way to read. Like, for instance, I have the prop iPad here. Say, for instance, I wanted to read, just hypothetically here, Kyler Matthews' latest masterpiece, A Boy for the Tentacle Monster. Say I wanted to read that. About an 18-year-old boy who is loved, I guess would be the word, by a Lovecraftian tentacle monster. If I wanted to read that, I certainly wouldn't feel any guilt about it. None whatsoever. And then question number 7, we finally got to the end of this thing with many, many digressions, is who do you tag? Which is the proper place for tagging people. At the end of a tag. It's not it you're tagged, it's tag you're it. Anyway, I have a few names here. James Holder, Revenant Reads, Gina Stanyer, Michael Vaughan, Scallydandling About the Books, and Black Sheep Books, if you'll indulge in a Manichaean tag. But I'll leave links to all their channels down below, and I'll leave links to Brian's original tag where he tags me, and also Lady Lovestead Reads. Fascinating discussion. I admit, I think there's some dodgy terminology here, but I'm really interested to hear the answers that the rest of you come up with. I really am. So I will be watching for this tag. But in the meantime, this one's gone on long enough. So I will wrap this up for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.